Hi everyone, it's Paul Tilley and welcome to our very first section of the first unit called Simple Interest. Now simple interest deals with an interest calculation that you would make on an investment that is normally less than 1 year in length. So short-term investments. And considering this issue of the time value of money, we recognize because money changes value over time, interest is like the rent that you pay on money. So we need to be able to calculate what is the exact amount of rent and really how much do the investment change over time. That's the basic crux of what we're doing in this very first section. Specifically, we're going to look at the concept of simple interest. We're going to look at the issue of the three elements in calculating the simple interest. That is principal, which is the original amount, the rate, which is really the interest rate, and the time. How far or how long does the loan last? And as I say, normally we're looking at investments of less than 1 year whenever we deal with simple interest. So the next thing we're going to look at in calculating simple interest deals with this issue of the calculation itself. The calculation itself has three elements, okay? In order to be able to consider interest, we have to have the principal, the rate, and the time. What could happen is that one of those elements is missing. So what we're going to be able to do is manipulating those items around so that we can determine the missing variable. We're also going to look at it from the point of view of how long the investment is. Normally we're given a finite period of time in investment. What if the finite time is period in days? How do we calculate the days? So next we're going to look at a very critical element, which is something called the future value, which is anticipating what the value of $1 will be at some point in time in the future given a principal rate and time. We also can work backwards when we have a situation where we know what the amount is at the end and we need to work back given the rate, the time. With that information, we should be able to figure out what the original amount was, which is really something called the present value. This section caps off with practical applications of these. So we're going to be looking at the application of simple interest in terms of investments. We're going to look at in terms of decision making, what investment is a better investment, giving a bunch of factors. And we're going to look at payment amounts. How much would the actual payment would be? So that's the real core of this particular section. So let's get into it. Interest is really a fee or a rent that lenders charge borrowers for using their money. So for a lot of us, we're on the borrowing side, but it also works from the opposite point of view where you are a lender. The lender needs to calculate how much interest he or she will expect. So debt plays a very important part of our financial system, and we really need to understand how to be able to calculate how much something is worth at some point in time. And that's really the gist of what we're looking at here. If you look at borrowing and lending tends to work under two basic interest calculation principles. The first principle deals with this short-term investment that's paid off less than a year, and we use something called a simple interest calculation there. And simple interest is really just a matter of taking a percentage rate and applying it to the amount and calculating how much interest is charged, adding it all up, that's the total repayment. Compound interest is the second and more complicated item that we'll be looking at, but it's also the more relevant item. Were loans that stretch over a period of a number of years. So in the effect of a compound interest, what we have is interest is accumulated on an annual basis, but what happens is we move from 1 year to the next, interest compounds or builds on top of itself. So for example, if you started out owing $100 at a 10% interest rate, at the end of year one, you'd owe $110. And then that 110 would accumulate interest of 10%, so you'd end up owing 121 the following year, and so on. So the interest accumulates interest under a compound setup. So first, let's take a look at simple interest. Simple interest is really calculated and quoted in 1 year increments. So we'll always see interest expressed as a yearly percentage, okay? So what we need to be able to do is to figure out how much interest would accumulate on a particular loan or whatever. In order to do that, we really need three things. We need the principal, how much loan is of, how much money are you borrowing? The rate, which is really looking at the interest rate expressed in a yearly percentage. And the time, which is how long does the loan extend for? And it could extend for a day's period, week's period, a month period, or a year period. And as interest is expressed in a yearly rate, time needs to be presented as a percentage of a year. So if, for example, 6 months, that would be half a year, or 6/12. In order to be able to calculate the amount of interest, what we do is we multiply the principal times rate times the time. Before we look at an example of that, I just wanted to add one more component. We don't necessarily always look for interest. Sometimes we'd look for principal, sometimes we'd look for rate, sometimes we'd look for time. It really depends on the information we're given. But given any three, you can calculate the fourth. The IPRT triangle, as illustrated here, shows you what the calculation will look like as you move through. So the format of this shows you how the formula should look. So if you are looking for I, the bottom three, PRT, are simply what you multiply together. If you're looking for P, for example, you're given I, R, and T, you just kind of scrape off the rest there and you'll know I over RT, interest over rate times time, will give you the principal. Or if you're looking for T, I over PR. If you want a more detailed description of how to use the IPRT triangle, take a look at this video right here that I put together, and you'll see the link up in the right-hand corner or in the course itself. Here's an example set right out of the textbook itself, and I'm going to take a look at the first one here now. But if you go to the video I have for this, and I'll put up a link to the video here, you should be able to see a video explainer of all of the odd number problems worked out and answered. If you want to stop the video, you can kind of look at the workouts right here that I've included for all of the odd number ones. As I say, you can go to the video and check it out in terms of how I went through the process of calculating each and every one of these odd number questions. So building on the IPRT calculation, one of the things we need to consider is this issue of time and how long a loan is outstanding for. Usually, depending on the interest rate and the amount of the loan, the number of days in a loan could make a significant difference with regards to the calculation of interest. So one of the things that we do is we do a number of days calculation. So let's say, for example, loans from June 1st to August 31st. June 1st corresponds to the 152nd day of the year. We can see that on the table. And August 31st corresponds to the 243rd day of the year. We can see that on the table. Subtracting one from the other, we get 91 days. So 91 divided by 365 days would give us our time. You can see in this slide here, I've got some other examples worked out, and the calculation for days is as illustrated. The basic problems that follow the time calculation are laid out right here. You'll see those in your textbook. And what I've done is in this video right here, I have gone through the odd number questions. So take a look at the link above to this video, or you can take a look next. I have illustrated the workouts in this section right here, and you can take a look at how I work them out. Now that we've got an understanding of how to calculate either the principal, the interest, the rate, or the time, we need to be able to apply that to future value and present value calculations. As I said at the beginning, these are the fundamental ones that we will be looking at with regards to figuring out what the total value of some short-term investment is, either at the front end, what we call the present value, or at the back end, which is what we would consider its future value. So simply, the future value is the present value plus the accumulated interest, or the present value is the future value less the accumulated interest. The trick to these is knowing what you're looking for. You're looking for the future value, you're looking for the present value. The basic formula for the future value is S, which represents future value, equals the present value, bracket 1 plus the rate times the time. So in order to calculate the present value, all you need to do is rejig the formula to work it out for P. So the present value is simply S divided 1 plus RT. So you can employ the same formula for both, just what are you figuring out for? S, the future value, or P, the present value? So there's lots of examples of these in the textbook in order to calculate these, and I have the list right here in front of you here. And as usual, in this particular video that you see I've linked to, I have worked out the odd number ones for these. So take a look at that. In addition, you can take a look at these right here. These I worked out for the even number questions there in that list. So take a look at these. You'll see that you can press pause and kind of see where I've come from in terms of the mechanics of working these out. Now that we have a grasp of how to do future and present value for simple interest calculations, it should occur to you that we could use these as a tool in order to evaluate what would be a better investment. Okay, so what we mean by a better investment really depends on where we're coming from a lender's point of view or a borrower's point of view. But effectively, what we're doing is evaluating two different investment options and figuring out which one is best for us based on that. Here's an example of a problem that would relate to this. So we got Herb, who's supposed to pay $1,500 to Rajat on September 20th. Herb wishes to delay payment until December 1st. So what amount should Herb expect to pay on December 1st? Rajat can earn 2.25% in a low-risk investment, and show where Rajat should not care whether he receives it at the original date or the new date. Really, that's what we're looking for. So effectively what we need to do is we know it's $1,500. That's the principal. September 20th was the date that it was supposed to be paid on. The driving it to December 1st means that it's 72 days later, so we have to ask ourselves, well, what's it going to be worth in 72 days later at the interest rate of 2.25%? So how do we figure that out? Well, we take our basic information. We know that the amount that we're dealing with is $1,500. We know that it's 72 days time, so the time is 72 divided by 365, which is 72 365th of a year. And we know the rate that person could get was 2.25%. We just throw that into the future value formula and we'll get $1,506.66. So effectively what we're saying is that, well, okay, on December 1st, I would take $1,506.66, and that would be equivalent to the original amount. So there is a set of basic problems on this in the textbook. Here they are right here. What I've done is in the video that I'll put up right now, you can take a look at how I solve the odd number questions related to equivalencies. Additionally, I'll include some of the workouts here that you see for, I think these are all even numbers that I've done here, so you can take a look at these as well. Thanks. Another situation that builds upon all the things that we've discussed so far is the equivalent value stream. So what we have in this situation is a couple of options. We have a payment stream A and a payment stream B, and we asked ourselves, what would make A and B equivalent? What are the combinations of interest and payments and these sorts of things? So in this calculation, really it's two separate problems built into one that basically ask, okay, what's the first scenario worth and what's the second scenario worth, or what requirements would it take to make that second scenario the same as the first? So in this video here, I do a comprehensive review of some of the questions and problems related to equivalent value streams. You must think about it from a point of view of a focal point and whether you need to get a future value or a present value. Also here, I've included some of the sample problems written out that you can basically pause here and take a look at. Finally, on our simple interest, we are busy calculating a final payment. So we have a mysterious final payment or a mysterious number of payments. And this example, the examples that I give in this video and these examples that I'm presenting here show how that's done. So it's important to take a look at that. And those effectively cover the major topics there in simple interest. So thanks for watching.